Zodiac Killer.
The Zodiac Killer was a serial killer who operated in Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The killer's identity remains unknown. The Zodiac murdered victims in Benicia, Vallejo, Lake Berryessa, and San Francisco between December 1968 and October 1969. 4 men and 3 women between the ages of 16 and 29 were targeted. The killer originated the name Zodiac in a series of taunting letters sent to the local Bay Area press. These letters included 4 cryptograms. Of the 4 cryptograms sent, only one has been definitively solved. Suspects have been named by law enforcement and amateur investigators, but no conclusive evidence has surfaced. In April 2004, the San Francisco Police Department marked the case inactive, yet reopened the case at some point prior to March 2007. The case also remains open in the city of Vallejo, as well as in Napa County and Solano County. The California Department of Justice has maintained an open case file on the Zodiac murders since 1969.
Victims confirmed.
Although the Zodiac claimed 37 murders in letters to the newspapers, investigators agree on only 7 confirmed victims, 2 of whom survived. They are David Arthur Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16, shot and killed on December 20, 1968, on Lake Herman Road, within the city limits of Benicia. Coordinates: 38 Deg 541.61 N 122 Deg 838.24 W/38.0948917 DEG N 122.14395556 DEG W/38.0948917 -122.14395556, Michael Reno Mago, 19, and Darlene Elizabeth Ferrin, 22. Shot on July 4, 1969, in the parking lot of Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. While Mago survived the attack, Ferrin was pronounced dead on arrival at Kaiser Foundation Hospital. Coordinates: 38 Deg 733.56 N 122 Deg 1127.94 W/38.1259889 DEG N 122.19109444 DEG W/38.1259889 -122.19109444, Brian Calvin Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia Ann Shepard, 22. Stabbed on September 27, 1969, at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Hartnell survived 8 stab wounds to the back, but Shepard died as a result of her injuries on September 29, 1969. Coordinates: 38 Deg 3348.29 N 122 Deg 1354.43 W/38.56341339 DEG N 122.23178661 DEG W/38.56341339 -122.23178661, Paul Lee Stein, 29, shot and killed on October 11, 1969, in the Presidio Heights neighborhood in San Francisco. Coordinates: 37 Deg 4719.47 N 122 Deg 2725.54 W/37.78874117 DEG N 122.45709444 DEG W/37.78874117 -122.45709444.
Suspected.
The following murder victims are suspected to be victims of Zodiac, though none has been confirmed. Robert Domingos, 18, and Linda Edwards, 17, shot and killed on June 4, 1963, on a beach near Gaviota. Edwards and Domingos were identified as possible Zodiac victims because of specific similarities between their attack and the Zodiac's attack at Lake Berryessa 6 years later. Coordinates: 34 Deg 28 11.20 N 120 Deg 10 7.14 W/34.46977778 DEG N 120.16865000 DEG W/34.46977778 -120.16865000 Shri Joe Bates, 18, stabbed to death and nearly decapitated on October 30, 1966, at Riverside City College in Riverside. Bates's possible connection to the Zodiac only appeared 4 years after her murder when San Francisco Chronicle reporter Paul Avery received a tip regarding similarities between the Zodiac killings and the circumstances surrounding Bates's death. College coordinates: 33 Deg 5819 N 117 Deg 2252 W/33.97194 DEG N 117.38111 DEG W/33.97194 -117.38111 Donna Laus, 25, last seen September 6, 1970, in State Line, Nevada. A postcard with an advertisement from Forest Pines Condominiums, near Incline Village at Lake Tahoe, pasted on the back was received at the Chronicle on March 22, 1971, and has been interpreted as the Zodiac claiming Lass's disappearance as a victim. No evidence has been uncovered to connect Lass's disappearance with the Zodiac Killer definitively. There is also a suspected third escapee from the Zodiac Killer. Kathleen Johns, 22, allegedly abducted on March 22, 1970, on Highway 132 near I-580, in an area west of Modesto. Johns escaped from the car of a man who drove her and her infant daughter around the area between Stockton and Patterson for approximately 11½ hours. Junction 132/I-580 coordinates: 37 Deg 3816.14 N 121 Deg 2355.22 W/37.6378167 DEG N 121.398672 DEG W/37.6378167 -121.398672.
Timeline. Lake Herman Road attack.
The first murders widely attributed to the Zodiac Killer were the shootings of high school students Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday on December 20, 1968, on Lake Herman Road, just inside Benicia city limits. The couple were on their first date and planned to attend a Christmas concert at Hogan High School about 3 blocks from Jensen's home. The couple instead visited a friend before stopping at a local restaurant and then driving out on Lake Herman Road. At about 10:15 p.m., Faraday parked his mother's Rambler in a gravel turnout, which was a well-known lover's lane. Shortly after 11 p.m., their bodies were found by Stella Borges, who lived nearby. The Solano County Sheriff's Department investigated the crime but no leads developed. Utilizing available forensic data, Robert Graysmith postulated that another car pulled into the turnout, just prior to 11 p.m. and parked beside the couple. The killer apparently exited the second car and walked toward the Rambler, possibly ordering the couple out of the Rambler. Jensen appeared to have exited the car first, yet when Faraday was halfway out, the killer apparently shot Faraday in the head. Fleeing from the killer, Jensen was gunned down 28 feet from the car with 5 shots through her back. The killer then drove off.
Blue Rock Springs attack.
Just before midnight on July 4, 1969, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mago drove into the Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, 4 miles from the Lake Herman Road murder site, and parked. While the couple sat in Ferrin's car, a second car drove into the lot and parked alongside them but almost immediately drove away. Returning about 10 minutes later, this second car parked behind them. The driver of the second car then exited the vehicle, approaching the passenger side door of Ferrin's car, carrying a flashlight and a 9mm Luger. The killer directed the flashlight into Mago's and Ferrin's eyes before shooting at them, firing 5 times. Both victims were hit, and several bullets had passed through Mago and into Ferrin. The killer walked away from the car but upon hearing Mago's moaning, returned and shot each victim twice more before driving off. On July 5, 1969, at 12:40 a.m., a man phoned the Vallejo Police Department to report and claim responsibility for the attack. The caller also took credit for the murders of Jensen and Faraday 6.5 months earlier. The police traced the call to a phone booth at a gas station at Springs Road and Tuolumne, about 3/10 of a mile from Ferrin's home and only a few blocks from the Vallejo Police Department. Ferrin was pronounced dead at the hospital. Mago survived the attack despite being shot in the face, neck and chest.
Letters from the Zodiac.
On August 1, 1969, 3 letters prepared by the killer were received at the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner. The nearly identical letters took credit for the shootings at Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs. Each letter also included 1/3 of a 408-symbol cryptogram which the killer claimed contained his identity. The killer demanded they be printed on each paper's front page or he would cruise around all weekend killing lone people in the night then move on to kill again, until I end up with a dozen people over the weekend. The Chronicle published its third of a cryptogram on page 4 of the next day's edition. An article printed alongside the code quoted Vallejo Police Chief Jackie Stilts as saying we're not satisfied that the letter was written by the murderer, and requested the writer send a second letter with more facts to prove his identity. The threatened murders did not happen, and all 3 parts were eventually published. On August 7, 1969, another letter was received at the San Francisco Examiner with the salutation "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." This was the first time the killer had used this name for identification. The letter was a response to Chief Stilts's request for more details that would prove he had killed Faraday, Jensen and Ferrin. In it, the Zodiac included details about the murders which had not yet been released to the public, as well as a message to the police that when they cracked his code they will have me. On August 8, 1969, Donald and Betty Harden of Salinas, California, cracked the 408-symbol cryptogram. It contained a misspelled message in which the killer claimed to be collecting slaves for the afterlife. No name appears in the decoded text, and the killer said that he would not give away his identity because it would slow down or stop his slave collection.
Lake Berryessa attack.
On September 27, 1969, Pacific Union College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were picnicking at Lake Berryessa on a small island connected by a sand-spit Twin Oak Ridge. A man approached them wearing a black executioner's type hood with clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes and a bib-like device on his chest that had a white 3" x3 cross-circle symbol on it. He approached them with a gun, which Hartnell believed to be a .45. The hooded man claimed to be an escaped convict from Deer Lodge, Montana, where he had killed a guard and stolen a car, explaining that he needed their car and money to go to Mexico. He had brought pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline and told Shepard to tie up Hartnell, before he tied her up. The killer checked, and tightened Hartnell's bonds after discovering Shepard had bound Hartnell's hands loosely. Hartnell initially believed it to be a weird robbery, but the man drew a knife and stabbed them both repeatedly. The killer then hiked 500 yards back up to Knoxville Road, drew the cross-circle symbol on Hartnell's car door with a black felt tip pen, and wrote beneath it, Vallejo/12-20-67-7-69/set27-69-630/by knife. At 7:40 p.m., the killer called the Napa County Sheriff's Office from a pay telephone to report this latest crime. The phone was found, still off the hook, minutes later at the Napa Car Wash on Main Street in Napa by KVON radio reporter Pat Stanley, only a few blocks from the sheriff's office, yet 27 miles from the crime scene. Detectives were able to lift a still wet palm print from the telephone but were never able to match it to any suspect. After hearing their screams for help, a man and his son who were fishing in a nearby cove discovered the victims and summoned help by contacting park rangers. Napa County Sheriff's deputies Dave Collins and Ray Land were the first law enforcement officers to arrive at the crime scene. Cecilia Shepard was conscious when Collins arrived, providing him with a detailed description of the attacker. Hartnell and Shepard were taken to Queen of the Valley Hospital in Napa by ambulance. Shepard lapsed into a coma during transport to the hospital and never regained consciousness. She died 2 days later, but Hartnell survived to recount his tale to the press. Napa County Sheriff Detective Ken Narlow, who was assigned to the case from the outset, worked on solving the crime until his retirement from the department in 1987.
Presidio Heights attack.
2 weeks later on October 11, 1969, a passenger entered the cab driven by Paul Stine at the intersection of Mason and Geary Streets, 1 block west from Union Square, in San Francisco, requesting to be taken to Washington and Maple Streets in Presidio Heights. For reasons unknown, Stine drove 1 block past Maple to Cherry Street. The passenger then shot Stine once in the head with a 9mm, took Stine's wallet and car keys, and tore away a section of Stine's blood-stained shirt tail. This passenger was observed by 3 teenagers across the street at 9:55 p.m., who called the police while the crime was in progress. They observed a man wiping the cab down before walking away towards the Presidio, 1 block to the north. 2 blocks from the crime scene, Officer Don Fuch, responding to the call, observed a white man walking along the sidewalk and stepping onto a stairway leading up to the front yard of one of the homes on the north side of the street. The encounter lasted only 5 to 10 seconds. The radio dispatcher had alerted to be on the lookout for a black suspect, so they drove past him without stopping. The mix-up in descriptions remains unexplained to this day. A search ensued, but no possible suspects were found. The 3 teen witnesses worked with a police artist to prepare a composite sketch of Stine's killer. Then, a few days later, this police artist returned, working with the witnesses to prepare a second composite sketch of the killer. Detectives Bill Armstrong and Dave Toohey were assigned to the case. The San Francisco Police Department investigated an estimated 2,500 suspects over a period of years.
Communication from the Zodiac.
On October 14, 1969, the Chronicle received another letter from the Zodiac, this time containing a swatch of Paul Stine's shirt tail as proof he was the killer. It also included a threat about killing schoolchildren on a school bus. To do this, Zodiac wrote, "Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out." At 2 p.m. on October 20, 1969, someone claiming to be the Zodiac called Oakland PD demanding that one of 2 prominent lawyers, F. Lee Bailey or Melvin Belly, appear on the local television show AM San Francisco, hosted by Jim Dunbar. Bailey was not available, but Belly did appear on the show. Dunbar appealed to the viewers to keep the lines open, and eventually, someone claiming to be the Zodiac called several times and said his name was Sam. Belly agreed to meet with him in Daly City, but the suspect never showed up. On November 8, 1969, the Zodiac mailed a card with another cryptogram consisting of 340 characters. The 340-character cipher has never been decoded. Numerous possible solutions have been suggested, but none can be claimed as definitive. On November 9, 1969, the Zodiac mailed a 7-page letter claiming the 2 policemen stopped and actually spoke with him 3 minutes after he shot Stine. Excerpts from the letter were published in the Chronicle on November 12, including the Zodiac's claim. That same day, Officer Don Fuch wrote a memo explaining what had happened the night of Stine's murder. On December 20, 1969, exactly 1 year after the murders of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, the Zodiac mailed a letter to Belly that included another swatch of Stine's shirt. The Zodiac claimed he wanted Belly to help him.
Modesto attack.
On the night of March 22, 1970, Kathleen Johns was driving from San Bernardino to Petaluma to visit her mother. She was 7 months pregnant and had her 10-month-old daughter beside her. While heading west on Highway 132 near Modesto, a car behind her began honking its horn and flashing its headlights. She pulled off the road and stopped. The man in the car parked behind her, approached her car, stated that he observed that her right rear wheel was wobbling, and offered to tighten the lug nuts. After finishing his work, the man drove off. Yet when Johns pulled forward to re-enter the highway, the wheel almost immediately came off the car. The man returned, offering to drive her to the nearest gas station for help. She and her daughter climbed into his car. During the ride, the car passed several service stations, but the man did not stop. For about 90 minutes he drove back and forth around the backroads near Tracy. When Johns asked why he was not stopping, he would change the subject. When the driver finally stopped at an intersection, Johns jumped out with her daughter and hid in a field. The driver searched for her using his flashlight, telling her that he would not hurt her, before eventually giving up. Unable to find her, he got back into the car and drove off. Johns hitched a ride to the police station in Patterson. When Johns gave her statement to the sergeant on duty, she noticed the police composite sketch of Paul Stine's killer and recognized him as the man who abducted her and her child. Fearing he might come back and kill them all, the sergeant had Johns wait, in the dark, at the nearby Mills restaurant. When her car was found, it had been gutted and torched. Most accounts claim he threatened to kill her and her daughter while driving them around, but at least one police report disputes that. John's account to Paul Avery of the Chronicle indicates her abductor left his car and searched for her in the dark with a flashlight. However, in one report she made to the police, she stated he did not leave the vehicle.
Further Zodiac communications.
Zodiac continued to communicate with authorities for the remainder of 1970 via letters and greeting cards to the press. In a letter postmarked April 20, 1970, the Zodiac wrote, "My name is," followed by a 13-character cipher. The Zodiac went on to state that he was not responsible for the recent bombing of a police station in San Francisco, referring to the February 18, 1970, death of Sergeant Brian McDonnell 2 days after the bombing at Park Station in Golden Gate Park, but added there is more glory to killing a cop than a SID because a cop can shoot back. The letter included a diagram of a bomb the Zodiac claimed he would use to blow up a school bus. At the bottom of the diagram, he wrote, equals 10, SFPD equals 0. Zodiac sent a greeting card postmarked April 28, 1970, to the Chronicle. Written on the card was, "I hope you enjoy yourselves when I have my blast," followed by the Zodiac's cross-circle signature. On the back of the card, the Zodiac threatened to use the bus bombs soon unless the newspaper published the full details he wrote. He also wanted to start seeing people wearing some nice Zodiac buttons. In a letter postmarked June 26, 1970, the Zodiac stated he was upset that he did not see people wearing Zodiac buttons. He wrote, "I shot a man sitting in a parked car with A38. The Zodiac was possibly referring to the murder of Sergeant Richard Redettish, a week earlier, on June 19. At 5:25 a.m., Redettish was writing a parking ticket in his squad car when an assailant shot him in the head with a .38 caliber pistol. Redettish died 15 hours later. SFPD denies the Zodiac was involved in this murder. It remains unsolved. Included with the letter was a Phillips 66 road map of the San Francisco Bay Area. On the image of Mount Diablo, the Zodiac had drawn a crossed circle similar to the ones he had included in previous correspondence. At the top of the crossed circle, he placed a 0, and then a 3, 6, and a 9. The accompanying instructions stated that the 0 was to be set to Mag. N. The letter also included a 32-letter cipher that the killer claimed would, in conjunction with the code, lead to the location of a bomb he had buried and set to go off in the fall. The cipher was never decoded, and the alleged bomb was never located. The killer signed the note with equals 12, SFPD equals 0. In a letter to the Chronicle postmarked July 24, 1970, the Zodiac took credit for Kathleen John's abduction, 4 months after the incident. In a July 26, 1970 letter, the Zodiac paraphrased a song from the Mikado, adding his own lyrics about making a little list of the ways he planned to torture his slaves in parades. The letter was signed with a large, exaggerated cross-circle symbol and a new score, equals 13, SFPD equals 0. A final note at the bottom of the letter stated, P.S. The mount. Diablo code concerns radians plus inches along the radians. In 1981, a close examination of the radian hint by Zodiac researcher Gareth Penn led to the discovery that a radian angle, when placed over the map per Zodiac's instructions, pointed to the locations of 2 Zodiac attacks. On October 5, 1970, the Chronicle received a 3x5-inch card signed by the Zodiac with a drawn with blood. The card's message was formed by pasting words and letters from an edition of the Chronicle, and 13 holes were punched across the card. Inspectors Armstrong and Toohey agreed it was highly probable the card came from the Zodiac.
Zodiac letter to Paul Avery.
On October 27, 1970, Chronicle reporter Paul Avery, who had been covering the Zodiac case, received a Halloween card signed with the letter Z and the Zodiac's cross-circle symbol. Handwritten on the card was the note "Peekaboo, you are doomed." The threat was taken seriously and received a front-page story on the Chronicle. Soon after receiving this letter, Avery received an anonymous letter alerting him to the similarities between the Zodiac's activities and the unsolved murder of Tree Joe Bates, which had occurred 4 years earlier at the City College in Riverside in the greater Los Angeles area, more than 400 miles south of San Francisco. He reported his findings in the Chronicle on November 16, 1970.
Riverside attack.
On October 30, 1966, 18-year-old Tree Joe Bates, a student of Riverside Community College, spent the evening at the campus library annex until it closed at 9 p.m. Neighbors reported hearing a scream around 10:30 p.m. Bates was found dead the next morning, a short distance from the library, between 2 abandoned houses slated to be demolished for campus renovations. The wires in her Volkswagen's distributor cap had been pulled out. She was brutally beaten and stabbed to death. A man's Timex watch with a torn wristband was found nearby. The watch had stopped at 12:24, but police believe the attack occurred much earlier. A month later, on November 29, 1966, nearly identical typewritten letters were mailed to the Riverside Police and the Riverside Press Enterprise, titled The Confession. The author claimed responsibility for the Bates murder, providing details of the crime that were not released to the public. The author warned that Bates is not the first and she will not be the last. In December 1966, a poem was discovered carved into the bottom side of a desktop in the Riverside City College Library. Titled "Sick of Living I'm Willing to Die," the poem's language and handwriting resembled that of the Zodiac's letters. It was signed with what were assumed to be the initials RH. During the 1970 investigation, Sherwood Morrell, California's top question documents examiner, expressed his opinion that the poem was written by the Zodiac. On April 30, 1967, exactly 6 months after the Bates murder, Bates' father Joseph, the Press Enterprise, and the Riverside Police all received nearly identical letters. In a handwritten scrawl, the Press Enterprise and police copies read "Bates had to die, there will be more," with a small scribble at the bottom that resembled the letter Z. Joseph Bates' copy read "She had to die, there will be more," this time without the Z signature. On March 13, 1971, 5 months after Avery's article linking the Zodiac to the Riverside murder, the Zodiac mailed a letter to the Los Angeles Times. In the letter he credited the police, instead of Avery, for discovering his Riverside activity, but they are only finding the easy ones, there are a hell of a lot more down there. The connection between Tree Joe Bates, Riverside and the Zodiac remains uncertain. Paul Avery and the Riverside Police Department maintain that the Bates homicide was not committed by the Zodiac, but did concede some of the Bates letters may have been his work to claim credit falsely.
Lake Tahoe disappearance.
On March 22, 1971, a postcard to the Chronicle, addressed to Paul Avery, and believed to be from the Zodiac, appeared to take credit for the disappearance of Don Ellis on September 6, 1970. Made from a collage of advertisements and magazine lettering, it featured a scene from an advertisement for Forest Pines condominiums and the Tex Sierra Club, sought victim 12, peek through the pines, past Lake Tahoe areas, and around in the snow. Zodiac's cross-circle symbol was in the place of the usual return address. Luss was a nurse at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino. She worked until about 2 a.m. on September 6, 1970, treating her last patient at 1:40 a.m. Later that same day. Both Luss's employer and her landlord received phone calls from an unknown male falsely claiming Luss had left town due to a family emergency. Luss was never found. What appeared to be a gravesite was discovered near the Claire Tappan Lodge in Norden, California, on Sierra Club property, but an excavation yielded only a pair of sunglasses. No evidence has been uncovered to connect the Luss disappearance with the Zodiac Killer definitively.
Santa Barbara attack.
In a Vallejo Times-Herald story appearing on November 13, 1972, Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office Bill Baker, Ret. postulated that the murders of a young couple in northern Santa Barbara County might have been the work of the Zodiac Killer. On June 4, 1963, high school senior Robert Domingos and fiancée Linda Edwards were shot dead on a beach near Lompoc, having skipped school that day for Senior Ditch Day. Police believed that the assailant attempted to bind the victims, but when they freed themselves and attempted to flee, the killer shot them repeatedly in the back and chest with a .22 caliber weapon. The killer then placed their bodies in a small shack and tried, unsuccessfully, to burn it down.
Final Zodiac letter.
After the Pines card, the Zodiac remained silent for nearly 3 years. The Chronicle then received a letter from the Zodiac, postmarked January 29, 1974, praising The Exorcist as the best satirical comedy that he had ever seen. The letter included a snippet of verse from the Mikado and an unusual symbol at the bottom that has remained unexplained by researchers. Zodiac concluded the letter with a new score, Me equals 37, SFPD equals 0.
Later letters of suspicious authorship.
A further communication sent by the public to members of the news media, some contained similar characteristics of previous Zodiac writings. The Chronicle received a letter postmarked February 14, 1974, informing the editor that the initials for the Symbionese Liberation Army spelled out an Old Norse word meaning kill. However, the handwriting was not authenticated as the Zodiac's. A letter to the Chronicle, postmarked May 8, 1974, featured a complaint that the movie Badlands was murder glorification, and asked the paper to cut its advertisements. Signed only A Citizen, the handwriting, tone, and surface irony were all similar to earlier Zodiac communications. The Chronicle subsequently received an anonymous letter postmarked July 8, 1974, complaining about one of its columnists, Marco Spinelli. The letter was signed The Red Phantom, Red with Rage. The Zodiac's authorship of this letter is debated. A letter, dated April 24, 1978, was initially deemed authentic, but was declared a hoax less than 3 months later by 3 experts. Dave Toohey, the SFPD homicide detective who had worked the case since the Stein murder, was thought to have forged the letter, because author Armistead Maupin believed the letter to be similar to fan mail he received in 1976 which he believed was authored by Toohey. While he admitted to writing the fan mail, Toohey denied forging the Zodiac letter and was eventually cleared of any charges. The authenticity of this letter remains unverified. On March 3, 2007, an American Greetings Christmas card sent to the Chronicle, postmarked 1990 in Eureka had recently been discovered in their photo files by editorial assistant Daniel King. Inside the envelope, with the card, was a photocopy of 2 U.S. postal keys on a magnet keychain. The handwriting on the envelope resembles Zodiac's print, but was declared inauthentic by forensic document examiner Lloyd Cunningham. However, not all Zodiac experts agree with Cunningham's analysis. There is no return address on the envelope nor is his crossed circle signature to be found. The card itself is unmarked. The Chronicle turned over all the material to the Vallejo Police Department for further analysis.
Suspects.
A number of suspects have been named. Robert Graysmith's book Zodiac advanced Arthur Lee Allen as a suspect based on circumstantial evidence. A letter sent to the Riverside Police Department from Bates' killer was typed with a Royal typewriter with an Elite type, the same brand found during a February 1991 search of Allen's residence. He owned and wore a Zodiac brand wristwatch. Allen lived in Vallejo and worked minutes away from where one of the first victims, Ferrin, lived and where one of the killings took place. In 2002, SFPD developed a partial DNA profile from the saliva on stamps and envelopes of Zodiac's letters. SFPD compared this partial DNA to the DNA of Arthur Lee Allen. A DNA comparison was also made with the DNA of Don Chaney, who was Allen's former close friend and the first person to suggest Allen may be the Zodiac Killer. Since neither test result indicated a match, Allen and Chaney were excluded as the contributors of the DNA, though it cannot be stated definitively that it is DNA from the Zodiac on the envelopes.
Current status of investigations.
In April 2004, the SFPD marked the case inactive, citing caseload pressure and resource demands. However, they reopened their case sometime before March 2007. In 2007, a man named Dennis Kaufman claimed that his stepfather Jack Tarrance was the Zodiac. Kaufman turned several items over to the FBI including a hood similar to the one worn by the Zodiac. According to news sources, DNA analysis conducted by the FBI on the items were deemed inconclusive in 2010. Kaufman's claims have later been widely discredited. He claimed to have incriminating rolls of film taken by his stepfather. The photos allegedly showed victims of the crimes. Kaufman later published some of these photos on his own webpage. The photos were very small, had low resolution, and were so blurry that nothing could be positively identified. An associate of Kaufman's, Nanette Bartow, who received her forensic document examining certificate from an unaccredited school, claimed to have matched Jack Tarrance's handwriting to that of the Zodiac Killer. However, in 2010, the FBI's head document examiner at Quantico deemed the handwriting inconclusive. In 2009, Deborah Perez claimed that her father, Guy Ward Hendrickson, was the Zodiac. However, Perez alleged previously that she was the illegitimate daughter of John F. Kennedy, so her claim that her father was the Zodiac has been viewed as unlikely. In 2009, a lawyer named Robert Tarbox, who, in August 1975, was disbarred by the California Supreme Court for failure to pay some clients, said that in 1972 a merchant mariner walked into his office and confessed to him that he was the Zodiac Killer. The seemingly lucid seaman, whose name Tarbox would not reveal due to confidentiality, described his crimes briefly but persuasively enough to convince Tarbox. The man claimed he was trying to stop himself from his opportunistic murder spree but never returned to see Tarbox again. Tarbox took out a full-page ad in the Vallejo Times-Herald in which he cleared the name of Arthur Lee Allen as a killer, his only reason for revealing the story 30 years after the fact. Robert Gray Smith, the author of several books on Zodiac, said Tarbox's story was entirely plausible. Retired police handwriting expert Lloyd Cunningham, who worked the Zodiac case for decades, added they gave me banana boxes full of Allen's writing, and none of his writing even came close to the Zodiac. Nor did DNA extracted from the envelopes, on the Zodiac letters, come close to Arthur Lee Allen. In 2009, an episode of the History Channel television series Mystery Quest looked at newspaper editor Richard Gajkowski, 1936–2004. During the time of the murders, Gajkowski worked for Good Times, a San Francisco counterculture newspaper. His appearance resembles the composite sketch, and Nancy Slover, the Vallejo police dispatcher who was contacted by the Zodiac shortly after the Blue Rock Springs attack, has identified a recording of Gajkowski's voice as being the same as the Zodiac's. Additional circumstantial evidence exists but cannot definitively connect Gajkowski to the murders. The case is open in Napa County and also in the city of Riverside. Retired police detective Steve Hodel argues in his book The Black Dahlia Avenger that his father, George Hill Hodel, Jr., was the Black Dahlia Killer whose victims include Elizabeth Short. The book caused the release of previously suppressed files and wire recordings by the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office of his father, which showed that he was a prime suspect in Short's murder. The LA District Attorney subsequently wrote a letter which is published in the revised edition stating that if he were still alive he would be prosecuted for the crimes. In a follow-up book, Hodel argued a circumstantial case that his father was also the Zodiac Killer based upon a police sketch, the similarity of the style of the Zodiac letters to the Black Dahlia Avenger letters and question document examination. On February 19, 2011, America's Most Wanted featured a story about the Zodiac Killer. A picture has recently surfaced of known Zodiac victim Darlene Ferrin and a man who closely resembles the composite sketch, formed based on eyewitness descriptions, of the Zodiac Killer. Police believe the photo was taken in San Francisco in the summer of 1966 or 1967. Police hope someone can identify the man in the photo. It has been suspected that the man in the photo is Darlene Ferrin's ex-husband, James Phillips. This has not been confirmed. Former California Highway Patrol officer Lyndon Lafferty argues that the Zodiac Killer is a 91-year-old Solano County, California man whom he calls George Russell Tucker. Using a group of retired law enforcement officers called the Mandamus 7, Lafferty discovered Tucker, and a cover-up for why he was not pursued. The man died in February 2012 and is not considered a suspect by law enforcement agencies. In February 2014, it was reported that a man named Louis Myers had confessed to a friend in 2001 that he was the Zodiac Killer, after learning that he was dying from cirrhosis of the liver. He requested that his friend, Randy Kenny, go to the police upon his death. Myers died in 2002, but Kenny allegedly had difficulties getting officers to cooperate and take the claims seriously. There are several potential connections between Myers and the Zodiac case. Myers attended the same high schools as victims David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. Myers also allegedly worked in the same restaurant as victim Darlene Ferrin. Myers also had access to the same sort of military boot whose print was found at the Lake Berryessa crime scene. Furthermore, during the 1971 to 1973 period when no Zodiac letters were received, Myers was stationed overseas with the military. Kenny claims that Myers confessed he targeted couples because he had a bad breakup with a girlfriend. While officers associated with the case are skeptical, they believe the story is credible enough to investigate.
Popular culture.
The Zodiac Killer's crimes, letters and cryptograms to police and newspapers inspired many movies, novels and television productions, as well as other serial killers.